got the scram monitor on my ankle, and it went off.
Mahomes Sr. is currently being held in the Smith County Jail.
That right there is the daddy of the most famous quarterback alive, sitting in a jail cell the same year he turned 55, while the state of Texas was busy trying to bury him under a 10-year prison sentence. So pull up a chair, because we are about to walk Pat Mahomes Sr. all the way from the pitcher's mound, through that courtroom, and right up to the man he is today at 55. 55 and back in a cell. Let me set the table for you the way it really went down, because the headlines moved fast and a lot of folks only caught the loud part. In the early days of February 2026, Pat Mahomes Sr. got arrested in Tyler, Texas, and the man was 55 years old when it happened. He was the father of the most famous quarterback breathing, and instead of being out somewhere celebrating his son's empire, he was walking into the Smith County Jail with his hands behind his back. The reason was a probation violation, and that takes a little explaining for anybody who ain't been following the saga. See, Pops was already serving probation from an older case, and the state claimed he broke the rules of that probation by drinking alcohol. That is the short version that ran across everybody's screen. The long version, the one with all the twists and turns, is the whole reason we sitting here today. It all kicked off on New Year's Day. While most of the world was nursing a hangover and writing down resolutions, Pat wears a monitor strapped to his ankle, and that little machine checks his body for alcohol around the clock. Every hour of every day, no breaks. On January 1st, that device threw up a high reading, and a few days later, his probation officer got word about it. One news report even put the exact number on what that monitor claimed it saw.
His ankle monitor indicated a TAC level of 0.045%.
That tiny number is what flipped his whole year upside down, because for a regular dude, a reading like that means nothing, but for a man on probation, a number that small can take your freedom. Once the officer got that report, the machine of the law started turning, and there was no stopping it. A violation report got filed, a warrant got issued, and when Pops showed up to meet with his probation officer on February 3rd, they slapped the cuffs on him right there and booked him into the county. Now I need you to lock in on that date, February 3rd, because it ain't random, and it is going to come back around later in this story and hit different. We will get to why, but trust me when I tell you that date already carried a heavy meaning in the Mahomes house long before this arrest. Hold it in your back pocket for now. What made this jail stay sting more than a normal one was the way they locked him in. Pat was being held without bond, and that means he could not just have somebody run up to the window, pay a few dollars, and walk him out into the parking lot. He had to sit there and wait it out, no matter who his son was or how many rings the family had on its hands. And the worst part is the state was not coming at him soft or looking to slap his wrist and send him home, because prosecutors pushed to have his probation revoked completely, which is the legal way of saying they wanted to tear the whole second chance up and start the punishment over from scratch. And we are not talking about a weekend in the can if they won that fight. We are talking serious time, because if his probation got revoked, Pops was staring down 10 years in prison. Sit with that one for a second, because a man who once stood on a major league mound throwing heat in front of a packed stadium was now sitting in a county cell being told he might not see the free world again until he was deep into his 60s. On top of that, the prosecutors brought another complaint to the table, saying he had fallen behind on his community service since his deal called for 3 hours every month, and they claimed he had missed several months of that work. So now you can picture the exact image the whole world got served in February. A famous last name attached to a booking photo, a man held with no bond, a prosecutor swinging for 10 years, and a court date sitting out there on the calendar like a storm cloud he could not outrun. That hearing got set for March, and a judge ordered Pops to stay locked inside the Smith County Jail until then, so there was no slipping home for a few weeks while the lawyers did their thing. He was stuck behind that door, listening to it lock every night, while his whole case got pulled apart piece by piece. The truth is, Pat is caught driving while intoxicated charges more than once over the years, and the very case he was serving probation for came from one of those nights gone wrong. That arrest, the one that started this whole probation in the first place, carries its own painful story, full of a traffic stop, an open can, and some words he said to the police that I promise will make your chest tighten when we open it up. It gets uglier before it ever gets better, and we are going to walk through every step of it. The arm that came first. Long before Pat was anybody's prisoner, and even before he was anybody's daddy, he was just a kid in a small Texas town who could do damn near anything you put in front of him on a field. He came up in Lindale, Texas, and the thing you have to understand is that he was not one of those one-trick athletes who is great at a single thing and useless at the rest, because Pops was nice at all of it. He went all-state as a quarterback, he went all-state in basketball, and he went all-state in baseball too, which means he was sitting at the very top of the entire state in 3 different sports at the same time. That is not normal, family. That is is a different kind of gift walking around in a teenager's body. Naturally, the colleges came running, and we are not talking about little programs nobody has heard of either, because he had scholarship offers in basketball and football from real schools like Arkansas. Most kids in that position would have grabbed one of those offers and never looked back, but young Pat looked over the whole spread of options and chose a completely different lane, and that lane was baseball. And baseball, for its part, fell in love with him right back, because the Minnesota Twins drafted him in the 6th round straight out of high school. So he turned pro, while he was still basically a teenager with no college stop in between, just straight into the grind of the minor leagues. The crazy part of the whole thing is that pitching was almost an accident he stumbled into, because he did not even start pitching until his senior year of high school after an injury pushed him toward the mound. So the very arm that carried him out of that small town and into the big leagues was a gift he only discovered at the last possible minute, a door he tripped into without meaning to, and that door ended up opening up his entire life. He grinded his way up through the minors the way everybody has to, season after season riding buses and chasing a call that most men never get. And then in 1992, that call finally came, because Pat Mahomes made his major league debut with the Minnesota Twins, a kid from Lindale standing on a big league mound, living out the exact dream he had bet his whole future on. And I want you to know Pops was not out there quiet and humble about it either, because the man had a mouth on him and a confidence that filled up the whole stadium. He believed in that arm with his whole chest, and he wanted everybody in the building to know about it. And there is a story he tells from his early days that paints the picture perfect. He talks about facing a young hitter and blowing fastballs right past him twice in a row, and naturally Pops got hot and started talking his talk, letting the whole dugout hear about how nobody could touch him. Then the kid came back up the next time and crushed a grand slam clean into the upper deck, and a Hall of Famer named Kirby Puckett, who had been sitting right there watching Pops run his mouth the whole time, leaned over and dropped a piece of wisdom on him he would carry forever.
In this game, you let a sleeping dog lie.
That was his welcome to the league, all wrapped up in one humbling moment. Loud talk followed by a long home run, followed by an old head telling him to sit down and learn. And honestly, that story tells you everything about who Pops was at his core. A man full of fire and full of nerve, sometimes carrying a little too much of both for his own good. But that same fire is exactly what kept him around. Because talking your talk only works if you can back it up, and Pops backed it up for a long time. He pitched 11 seasons in the major leagues, which is not some quick visit that ends after a cup of coffee. That is a real career built brick by brick, and he stacked it across 6 different teams, including the Twins, the Red Sox, the Mets, the Rangers, the Cubs, and the Pirates. The man even took his talents overseas and spent 2 seasons playing ball in Japan, chasing the game clear across the world because that is how deep it ran in his blood. But his sweetest run came in New York wearing a Mets uniform, because in 1999, Pops turned into something close to magic. Every time they handed him the ball out of the bullpen, he went 8-0 that whole season and helped push the Mets into the playoffs, which means he won 8 games and lost none. A perfect record in relief. And that is the kind of season that makes a whole fan base remember your name decades later. There is one game in particular that shows off the full package he was working with, and it came against the Cubs in extra innings, 13 innings deep with everybody on both sides running on empty. Pops was out there on the mound doing his job, but then Pops was also up at the plate swinging the bat his own self, like a man who refused to let anybody else decide the outcome.
It's an RBI single from Pat Mahomes.
He drove in the go-ahead run with his own bat, then walked right back out there and slammed the door shut to win the whole game, getting it done with his arm and his bat in the same long afternoon. That is the Pat Mahomes the baseball world fell for, and when it was all said and done, the numbers told the story of a real one, because he finished with a 42-39 record and 452 strikeouts across his career. Pops was never the superstar whose face was on the magazine covers. He was the fighter, the dog who hung around the big leagues for over a decade because he flat out refused to quit. And there is a beauty in that kind of grind that the highlight reels never quite capture. Here's the thing you have to understand about Pops though, because it is the key that unlocks everything else. For him, sports were never just a paycheck or a job he clocked into. They were the whole soul of the family. The game was handed down to him, and he fully intended to hand it right back down to his own. He talks about his own father like a man who built the whole foundation that he stands on to this very day.
Well, he's kind of the king, you know.
That is how Pop sees his own daddy, as the king, the one who put him onto sports in the first place and taught the entire family how the game is supposed to be played the right way. So when you stack the whole life up, the boy who went all-state in 3 sports, the teenager drafted into pro ball, the man who pitched 11 years in the majors and went perfect for the Mets and won games with both his arm and his bat, the player who learned at the feet of a Hall of Famer and learned the game from a father he calls the king. You're looking at a rich and full life by any honest measure. By the regular yardstick the world uses, Pop's already won. He reached the very top of a sport that breaks most men's hearts before they ever get a real sniff of it. But here is the turn that makes this whole story matter, because the greatest thing Pat Mahomes ever made in his life was not a pitch, it was not a win, and it was not some record in a book. The greatest thing he ever made was his sons, because that golden arm and that love of the game and that fire he carried out of Lindale did not die with him. He handed it down, and one of the people he handed it to grew up to become the most famous athlete walking the planet. So to really answer whether this man's life is heartbreaking, we have to step inside the house he built, the house full of sons, because that house holds the brightest light in his entire story. Let me walk you through the front door. A house full of sons. For all the trouble that has chased Pops around over the years, there is one thing that has stayed rock solid through all of it, and that is the fact that the Mahomes men are tight. They have been tight for a long time, and Pops raised his boys the exact same way his own father raised him, with sports running through everything and his presence baked into every part of their lives. When he talks about his role in those boys' lives, he says it real plain, that he is the one who got them into sports, the one who taught them how to play, and the one who shows up when it counts. And the wild thing is that those boys did not just turn out fine. They turned out to be something the world had to stop and pay attention to. The oldest one you already know better than you know some of your own family, because Patrick Mahomes II, born back in 1995, is the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, and not just any quarterback either. The man has played in 5 Super Bowls and walked away with 3 of them, and a whole lot of people will tell you straight up that he is one of the greatest to ever touch the position. That is Pop's son, and that same golden arm Pops had out on the mound clearly did not disappear. It just showed back up in his boy's throwing hand and made the family famous all over again. Think about what that really means for a father, because Pops already reached the big leagues, which is a 1 in a million dream by itself. And then he turned around and raised a son who blew clean past even that and became a global superstar. There are not many men on this earth who can say their child outdid a whole major league career, but Pops can say it with his chest. And the football connection runs deeper than just talent, because Pops grew up a Dallas Cowboys fan and he passed that down too. So Patrick grew up loving the Cowboys because of his daddy. The story goes that when Patrick was balling at Texas Tech and his team would roll through the Cowboys stadium, the Cowboys' big names used to leave the young Mahomes little notes telling him he was going to be a Cowboy one day. It never panned out that way, since Patrick ended up a Chief instead. But Pops could not be happier about how the whole thing landed, and you can hear the pride in his voice when he talks about it. But Patrick is far from the only son in this house, because the family tree spreads out wide and strong. There is Jackson, Patrick's younger brother, who became a social media personality with a serious following, taking a completely different road than his brother, but carrying the same family hunger to make something out of himself in front of the world. Then there's Graham, and you can hear Pop's light all the way up whenever Graham's name comes into the conversation. Graham is Patrick's half-brother, and he is an athlete in his own right who chased football hard. And for a stretch, he was lining up at wide receiver for Brown University while Pops drove out to watch him grow into his game. And Pops will tell you that out of all the boys, folks say this is the one who looks the most like him. That is a proud daddy right there. No two ways about it. Graham later kept moving on his football journey, and he went on to play at Rice University after his time at Brown, still chasing the same dream his father chased decades ago in a different sport. Pops has even talked openly about the dream of one day seeing 2 of his sons in the NFL at the very same time, both Patrick and Graham wearing pro jerseys on Sundays, and whether or not that picture ever comes fully true, the point underneath it stays the same. This is a man who is still deep in the business of raising winners, still hands-on, still pushing his kids toward the next level even while his own life is catching hell. And the love does not stop with the sons either, because now there is a whole new generation coming up behind them. Patrick has his own children now, and his son named Patrick Lavon Mahomes III came into the world back in late 2022. A little man the family calls Bronze. So Pops is a granddaddy now, and the baseball man buried deep inside him is already out here dreaming about that little boy and what he might become. The night the monitor went off. Now we go back to where the legal nightmare really started, and we go back to that date I told you to keep in your back pocket, February 3rd. Back in February of 2024, Pops got pulled over by the police in Tyler, Texas. And when the officer walked up to that car, he reported seeing an open 16-ounce beer can sitting right there in the console. They arrested him for driving while intoxicated, and I need you to understand this was not his first rodeo with that charge, not by a long shot. Reports called it his sixth driving while intoxicated arrest in Smith County going back to 2012, and 6 arrests spread across all those years is not some run of bad luck. That is a pattern carved deep into a man's life long before this particular night ever happened. But it was the timing of this one that cut the deepest into the family, because the arrest came a little more than a week before his son was set to play in the Super Bowl. Patrick was about to lead the Chiefs into a championship against the 49ers. The whole country had its eyes locked on that family. And right in the middle of the brightest week of his son's entire life, Pops got hauled in on a drunk driving charge. And then it got even darker, because according to the reports about that night, Pops told the officers that the arrest was going to mess with his son and could cost the Chiefs the Super Bowl. Sit with that for a second, because in the lowest moment of his own bad decisions, his mind ran straight to his son's game. And that is a heartbreaking little window into a man who knows full well what his trouble does to the people he loves, yet keeps right on making the same mistake anyway. That arrest is what led to the guilty plea. And in September of 2024, Pops pleaded guilty and got handed 5 years of probation instead of prison, which was a real second chance with some real strings attached. That first year came with intense supervision, and the warning was crystal clear. Because if he failed this probation, he was looking at 10 years in prison. But there was a hopeful note hiding in there too. Because at the time of that sentencing, Pops was 6 months sober. He was putting in the work, and he was even out here celebrating that sobriety online. So for a minute, it looked like maybe the 6th time was finally the wake-up call that stuck. And for over a year, the man held it down. Until New Year's Day of 2026 rolled around and that ankle monitor threw up its high reading, which is the exact chain we walked through at the very top of all this. The high number on January 1st, the report a few days later, the warrant, and then the arrest on February 3rd. And there it is again, February 3rd, the same date, 2 years apart. The arrest that started the probation landed on February 3rd of 2024, and the arrest that almost ended the whole thing landed on February 3rd of 2026. So the very day that once smashed right into his son's Super Bowl week came circling back around like a curse he could not shake. So Pops sat in that jail with no bond while the state came at his neck looking to revoke the probation and cash in that 10-year sentence. And from the outside looking in, it genuinely looked like the end of the road for him. But this is exactly where the whole story flips on its head, because that monitor was only one piece of the puzzle, and every other piece told a completely different story. When Pops finally got out and stood in front of the cameras, he laid out exactly how he saw the whole situation, and you could hear the hurt in it.
Yeah, I thought it was the right decision. I hate that it had to come to this.
He hated that it ever came to this, but he stood firm on what he believed actually happened, and he pointed his finger straight at the machine strapped to his ankle.
I got the scram monitor on my ankle, and it went off.
So the monitor going off was never the thing in question. Everybody agreed on that part. The real fight was over whether that machine was actually telling the truth, and Pops had a simple answer ready for that.
But, I guess it's a machine. Everything makes mistakes.
A machine, and machines make mistakes. That was his whole defense boiled down to its core, and the man had the proof sitting right behind those words to back it all up. The thing he wanted the whole world to hear most of all was about the streak he had been keeping.
Again, I know I haven't had a drink in over 2 years.
2 years sober, in his own words, and the lab results lined right up behind him to tell the same story. On January 5th, he gave a urine test, and it came back negative for alcohol. And then on January 9th, he gave another one, and that one came back negative too. So you got 2 clean tests sitting there right after the monitor screamed that he had been drinking. And his legal team did not stop there. They kept stacking the evidence, because his attorney said a hair follicle test came back clean, and that Pops also passed a polygraph test in which he stated he did not drink any alcohol. A lie detector, a hair test, and 2 urine tests, all of it pointing in the exact same direction. And then came the final crack in the whole case against him, because there were differing opinions among the experts about whether his ankle monitor was even working right in the first place, which means the one piece of evidence that kicked off this entire arrest, that high reading, might have come from a busted device. So the whole thing changed direction in a hurry. The hearing came in March, and the state, that same side that was just out here gunning for 10 years, backed all the way down, because the prosecutors withdrew their request to revoke his probation and the push for prison got dropped. Now the judge did not just let Pops skate away with nothing, because his probation got extended by 2 years, bringing it up to 7 years total, and he got ordered to catch up on his community service and to enter an outpatient treatment program. He was also handed a 30-day jail sentence, but he got credit for the time he already sat, so he walked right out the door. That Monday in March, sometime after noon, Pat Mahomes Sr. was released from the Smith County Jail, no 10 years, no prison, and he went home a free man. It's really heartbreaking. Let me be fair to the painful side first, because none of it is fake, and I'm not about to sit here and pretend it is. Pat Mahomes Sr. has been wrestling a demon that has followed him around for well over a decade, and 6 DWI arrests in one county since 2012 is not some streak of bad luck you can shrug off. That is a real pattern with real damage behind it. He had already done time before this latest mess too, including a 40-day sentence for an earlier DWI back in 2019 that he served out on weekends, and he rolled into his 55th year with 7 years of probation hanging over his head and a court order to walk into treatment. That is a heavy way to be living, and there is nothing sweet about a machine strapped to your ankle and a prosecutor across the courtroom trying to put you away for 10 years. The struggle is real, and it would be flat-out dishonest to act like it is not. So if heartbreaking just means this man has been fighting something hard in public for years, then fine, that part holds up. Look at how the worst chapter actually closed out, because the state came in wanting 10 years, and the man walked out a free dude instead. The monitor swore up and down that he was drinking, but 2 urine tests, a hair follicle test, and a polygraph all stood up and said he was not. And on this particular case, the evidence pointed at a machine being wrong rather than a man falling back off the wagon. Even the prosecutors themselves dropped their push to revoke him, and in his own words, he had not touched a drink in over 2 years. That is not the closing line of a sad story. Family, that might just be the opening line of a better one, and then you got that house full of sons we walk through. Because a father does not get to be lonely when he raised a 3-time Super Bowl champion with his own 2 hands. He does not get to be forgotten when his boys are out here traveling the country chasing greatness, and his wife is on the sideline filming their touchdowns. And he sure does not get to be a man with no future when he is a granddaddy out here dreaming out loud about little Bronze one day, picking up a baseball and carrying the family game back to life. That is a man with people in his corner. That is a man with real reasons to keep getting up in the morning, and you cannot tell that part of the story and still call his whole life a tragedy. So put the whole thing up on the scale and weigh it honest. On the one side, you got a genuine battle with alcohol, a long record, and a probation clock ticking for years. But on the other side, you got a major league career. 3 sons out here chasing their own greatness, a grandson, a wife who rides for him, a clean stretch of sobriety he is fighting to protect, and a court fight he actually went out and won. When you weigh it all out with clear eyes, this is not the story of a broken man sitting at the dead end of the road. This is the story of a man fighting a hard fight who keeps on getting up off the canvas, surrounded the whole time by a family that has refused to let go of him. That is exactly why I say the title oversells it, because his life now is heartbreaking makes it sound like the credits are already rolling, and Pops is not finished, not even close. He is 55. He is free. He is sober by his own word. And he is loved, and the truer headline is a whole lot messier and a whole lot more human than that. A man with a problem and a family, losing some rounds and winning others, and still standing on his feet. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.